Hello, everyone. So, our topic for today is the core competence of the corporation, and the author of this article is C.K. Prahlad and Gary Hammer. So, to start with, your whole organization can support your competitive advantage only when you have clearly defined your competencies. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the 1980s, the top executives were being judged based on how they restructure, declutter, and delayer their corporations, whereas in 1990s, the judgment criteria was their ability to identify, cultivate, and exploit the core competencies which enable growth. So considering two companies, GTE and NEC, GTE was active in telecommunications and NEC had computer businesses. Now in 1980, the sales of GTE was much higher than NEC. But in 1988, the sales of NEC surpassed that of GTE. Next slide, please. So GTE became a telephone operating company with a position in defense and lighting. However, it sold off Sylvania TV and Telenet, amongst others, and closed down semiconductors, which eventually eroded the international position of GTE. Next slide, please. Now, on the other side, NSE became world leader in semiconductors and a top player in telecommunications and computing. Beyond public switching and transmission, NSE diversified to consumer electronics, which also included laptop computers, to bridge the gap between telecommunications and the office automation. So unlike GTE, NSE did not consider itself to be a collection of SBUs, but rather it had put itself out as a portfolio of core competencies. Next slide, please. Now, rethinking the corporation. So it is a daunting task for the management to build a company which not only renders products irresistible, but also create required products which do not give the feeling of déjà vu. Now, earlier, to get photos clicked, we needed a camera, but who would have thought that even using a smartphone, you will be able to take photos today? Next slide, please. Now, NEC versus GT. So in the early 1970s, NEC stated its intention to explore the convergence of computing and communications. Now, NEC accumulated a broad range of core competencies, and it had also put in place a CNC committee of top managers to look after the development of core products and core competencies. Next slide. The top management of NSE decided that the company's most important core product would be semiconductors. Next slide, please. Now moving on to GTE. GTE did not have any clarity of the strategic intent and strategic architecture, nor there was any commonly accepted view of core competencies. Moreover, GTE was decentralized, and this made it even more difficult to focus on the core competencies. So the next slides will be taken over by my friends. Thank you.
So now we'll discuss the root of competitive advantages. Core competencies are the collective learning in the organizations, especially how to coordinate diverse production skills and integrate multiple streams of technologies. A lot of companies started working on different technologies and featured to compete. The management's ability to consolidate corporate-wide technologies and production skills into competencies that empower individual businesses to adapt quickly to changing opportunities. Core competency is communication, involvement, and a deep commitment to working across organizational boundaries. Management trapped in the strategic business unit mindset almost inevitably finds it individually businesses dependent on external sources for critical components such as motor or compressors. In the next slide, we'll discuss about how not to think of competency. So cultivating core competencies does not mean outspending rivals on research and development. This will only lead to a higher cost for research and development. Nor does the core competency mean shared cost, as when two or more SBUs use a common facility, a plant, service factory, or sales force, or share a common component. This will lead to confusion complicated business structure, and unnecessary switching cost. And then the last point is building core competencies is more ambitious and different than integrating vertically. The next slide will be discussed by my teammates.
So now we will discuss about the identifying core competencies and losing them. Three tasks for identifying core competencies in a company are: number one, a core competency provide potential access to a wide variety of market. Competence is display system, for example, enable a company to participate in such diverse business as calculators, miniature TV sets, monitors for laptop computers, and automotive dashboards, which is why Cashier's entry into the handheld TV market was predictable. Number two, a core competence should make a significant contribution to a perceived customer benefit of the product. Clearly, Honda engine expertise fills the bill. Number three, a core competence should be difficult to competitor to imitate, and it will be difficult if it is complex harmonization of individual technologies and production skill. A rival might acquire some of the technologies that comprise the core competence, but it will find it more difficult to duplicate the more or less comprehensive pattern of the internal coordination and learning. Few companies are likely to build world leadership in more than 5 or 6 fundamental competencies. Still, it is probably a good discipline to generate a list of this short and to see aggregate companies as building blocks. Most common companies hardly think about competencies in these terms at all. Companies that judge competitiveness their own and their competitors primarily in terms of price or performance of end products are counting the erosion of core competencies or making too little effort to enhance them. Let's take an example of Sizer. Unlike Honda, it has tended to view engines and powertrains as simply one more component. Sizer is becoming increasingly dependent on Mitsubishi and Honda. It is difficult to imagine Honda yielding manufacturing responsibilities, much less design or of a critical a part of a car function to an outside company, which is why Honda has made an enormous commitment to Formula One racing. Honda has been able to pull its engine related technologies in it has parallelized into a corporate wide competency from which it develops world beating products despite R&D budgets smaller than those of General Motors and Toyota. So one of the way of losing the core competency may be the fundamental technology changes of the supplier decided to enter the market directly and become a competitor. That company's product line, along with all of its investment in marketing and distribution, could be vulnerable. Outsourcing can provide a shortage in a more competitive product, but it is typically contributed little to the building the people embodied skills that are needed to sustain product leadership. And and another way of losing is forging opportunities to establish competencies that are evolving in existing business. For example, one can see a company like Sony reducing its emphasis on VCS without reducing its commitment to video-related competencies. Sony Betmax led to a debatable, but it emerged into a videotape recording company intact and is currently changing Matsuhisa in 8 camcorder market. So next we will discussing about the form core competencies to core product. The tangible link The tangible link between identify core competencies and end product is what we call the core product. The physical embodiment of one or more competencies core product are the components of subsistability that actually contribute the value of the end product. For example, Canon is reputed to have a 84% worldwide manufacturing share in desktop laser printer, even though its brand shares in the laser printer business in minuscule. Similarly, Matsuhita has a world manufacturing share of about 45% in key VCR component, far in excess in the brand share. Panasonic, JVC, and other of 20%, and Mitsuhisa has a commanding core product share in compressors worldwide, estimated at 40%, even though its brand share in both the air conditioning and refrigerator business is quite small. Because global competition is fought out over various rules for different stakes at each level, it is critical to distinguish between core skills, core product, and end product. A company will almost certainly be a winner at each level of in terms of building or defending leadership over time. The objective at the core competency level is to establish global leadership in the design and development of certain type of productivity functionality. This firm attempts to maximize the global manufacturing share in core goods in order to maintain leadership in their designated core competency areas. The production of core goods for a diverse range of external customer-generated income and market feedback, which at least in part of defines the rate at which core skills may be strengthened and extended. Control over the key item is essential for various variety of reasons. A corporation with a dominating position in core goods can affect the evolution of application at end markets. Sony and Philips has been able to influence the growth of the computer peripheral sectors in optical media storage that to compact audio device related core goods such as data drivers and lasers. As the corporation expands the number of application venues for its core goods, it may constantly lower the cost, time, and risk allocation with the new product development. In summary, well-targeted core goods can lead to the scale and scope economics. So the further slides will be discussed by my teammates.
Thank you, Shanak. So next we'll be discussing about the tyranny of the SBU. So the first point is the underinvestment in developing a core competency and core products. So when the organization is conceived as a multiplicity of SBUs, no single business may feel responsible for maintaining a viable position in core product, nor be able to justify the investment required to build world leadership in some core competence. So in the absence of a more comprehensive view imposed by corporate management, SBU manager will tend to underinvest. So companies such as Kodak, Philips have recognized this as a potential problem, and they have begun searching for new organizational form that will allow them to develop and manufacture core product from both internal and external customers. The second is imprisoned resources. So as the business's unit grows, it often develops its own set of skills. People that represent this skill are frequently considered as unique property of the company where they grew up. So a manager from another SBU who requests to borrow talented personnel will almost certainly be turned down. So the managers in the SBU are not only hesitant to lend their competent carriers, those are the talented employees, but they may even hide the talent in order to prevent it from being redeployed in search of a new chance. So when competencies are imprisoned, people who possesses them are not assigned to the most interesting chances, and their talent deteriorate. So small businesses like Canon can also can not only compete with this industry giants such as Xerox, if they can compete if they fully leverage their core skills. Then this third point is the bounded innovations. So individual SBUs will only explore the innovative opportunities that are close at hand if fundamental competencies are not recognized, such as marginal product line extensions or geographic expansions. Only when managers remove their SBU blinkers, only then will the hybrid opportunities emerge, such as fax machines, laptops, computer, handheld televisions, or portable music systems. So at the time, Canon appeared to be in the camera industry, but it was actually planning to become the world leader in copiers. So the realm of innovations has expanded when the organization is viewed in terms of core competencies. Then we'll be seeing that in the article it has been seen that the three different planes on which the battles of global leadership are waged, that is the core competence, core product, and the end product. A corporation has to know whether it is winning or losing on each plane. So, by a sheer weight of investment, a company might be able to beat its rival to blue sky technologies, yet still lose the race to build core competence leadership. So, if a company is winning the race to build core competencies, in few technologies maybe, it will almost certainly outspace the rivals in the new business development. So, if a company is winning the race to capture world manufacturing shares in core product, it will probably capture the rivals in improving product features and price performance ratios. In the next slide, we'll be talking about the two concepts of the corporation, that is the SBO or the core competencies. So that the new terms of competitive engagement cannot be understood using these analytical tools designed to manage the diversified corporation about the 20 years ago. So when competition was primarily domestic, so for example, this GE versus Westinghouse, General Motor versus this Ford, that are given in the case, and all the key players spoke the same business school and consultancy language. So the prescription from the past may have a harmful adverse effect, and the need for new principles is particularly apparent in companies established solely on the basis of SBO logic. So these two concepts of the corporation SBO or core competency summarizes the consequences of the alternative corporate concept. So here it has in the figure below you can see that there are two divisions has been given, differentiation has been given on the basis of competition on the corporate structure and the status of the business unit, the resource allocation, the value added by the top management. So the next slide will be discussed by my teammate.
So next we will be discussing about the developing strategic architecture. So we believe that senior management should spend a significant amount of its time developing a corporate-wide strategic architecture that establish objectives of competence building. A strategic architecture is a roadmap of the future that identifies which core competencies to build and their constituent technologies. So, by providing an impetus for learning from alliance and a focus for internal development efforts, a strategic architecture can dramatically reduce the investment needed to secure future market leadership. So, the architecture provides a logic for product and market diversification. Like for example, at Vickers, diversification options have been judged in the context of being the best power and motion control company in the world. So the strategic architecture should make resources allocation priorities transparent to the entire organization. It provides a template for allocation decisions by top management. It helps lower level managers to understand the logic of allocation priorities and disciplines senior management to maintain the consistency. So next. So next is the redeploying to exfoliate competencies. So if the company's core competency are its critical resource, and if top management must ensure that competency carriers are not held hostage by some particular business, then it follows that SBUs should bid for core competencies in the same way they bid for capital. Once top management has identified overachieving competencies, it must ask business to identify the projects and people closely connected with them. So elements of Canon's core competency in optics are spread across the businesses and diverse as cameras, copiers, and semiconductor. So when Canon identify an opportunity in digital laser printers, it gives SBU managers the right to raid other SBUs to pull together the required pool of talent. So transfers for the sake of building core competencies must be recorded and appreciated in the corporate memory. It is reasonable to expect a business that has surrounded core skills and on behalf of corporate opportunities in other areas to lose for a time some of its competitiveness. So the top management must add value by enunciating the strategic architecture that guides the competences acquisition process. Thank you.